we can't ignore our emotional health any more than we could ignore our physical health, our mental health, or our spiritual health. But I think that we try to ignore our emotional health, and we get these messages from society. We get very extreme messages when it comes to emotions. Either it's, follow your heart, which, whatever you feel like, do, whatever you want, take it, go after it. We get that kind of message about our emotions, or we also get the emotions and feelings are not your friend. There's a guilt shame message when it comes to emotions and feelings. Like we shouldn't be led around by our emotions and feelings. We should work harder, ignore those things that come up in our lives, and that makes us stronger humans. Be stronger, be stronger than your emotions. But the truth is that our emotions were designed, they're integrated into us as important signals in our body, signals for what's going on internally. They're meant to make us introspective, right? For us to look inside and figure out what's going on. Kind of like a car, like when your check engine light comes on, you don't just ignore it. You don't say, oh, well, that's a bad thing. We need to get that taken care of. Let's just have check engine lights removed from the car. And then we'll all have better cars. No, the reality is there's a reason for that signal. There's something going on inside of your car that needs to be addressed. And so when we try to ignore, hide, or fight our emotions, we are actually making them stronger in our lives. When we avoid them, they're not going to go away, right? If they do, we're in trouble. We're a psychopath. We're a sociopath. We have a tendency towards criminal behavior if they go away. And so when they come back, they'll be stronger because it's that light, that warning light saying, hey, check me, check me, check me. And so we need to be able to address them. And the more that we address them, the more that we address our emotions, the more regulated our nervous systems will get. Because remember, we talked about our nervous system is designed for your survival, and it's designed to protect you. And so when it's giving off these signals, when your body is giving off these signals, these emotional signals, and you're just ignoring them and putting them to the side, or you're pushing them down, or you're shaming yourself and guilting yourself for having them, your body starts to not trust you to take care of things. So it has to go another route. It has to try to take care of things itself. And then we come up, enter into anxiety and depression land, and, panic attacks and all these things that your body is doing because it's not getting the message out to you. It's not, you're not processing the message. But the more that you address those things as they come up, these emotions and these feelings, the more that you figure out what they're indicating to you, the more regulated you will get because your nervous system will trust you. So let me just talk about a few examples of this, and I'm going to do this kind of in a story form. So we're going to talk about Sally, who is very frustrated and angry with her sister. Her sister does not manage her finances well, and she keeps coming up short. And the first thing she does is call up Sally and ask to borrow money. Sally has been taught that you do everything for family, right? You are committed to family. Family is first. Family is everything. And so she feels like she has to give her sister this money. She also has been taught to share. She wants to be viewed as a giving person. And so she just continues to tell herself that this is what she has to do, that she's trapped in giving her sister this money, which of course makes her feel frustrated and angry and a little bit bitter. But every time she feels these feelings come up inside of her, she thinks, I'm such a bad person. How could I feel this way about my sister? How could I not want to share this? This is not how I want to be. And so she just stuffs those emotions back in, cuts them off, ignores them, hides from them so that she can feel a little bit better about herself and move on. This keeps happening in her life, and it's going to go one of two ways, right? She'll become very bitter, like a very bitter person, because she keeps having this happen, and she's not willingly giving, she's not facing the emotions. And so she just becomes more and more bitter at her sister, and it affects their relationship in a lot of ways that she probably doesn't even notice, but it does, because bitterness will always affect the way that we deal with a person. She starts trying to hide from, avoid, and even want to be around her sister. And so that could happen. Or she could just keep piling and piling and piling up this anger and frustration, and eventually it's going to explode all over her sister, probably. And both of these things will affect generations because they affect our children, the other family and friends that we have around us. A lot of times these type of situations where we're not addressing our anger and frustration end up affecting a lot more people than we would even guess that they would. But if Sally will take a good look at her anger and her frustration and realize those are signals that a boundary is being violated inside of her, that she's being taken advantage of, that this is something that she needs to address in this relationship and with her sister, she could do a couple of things then. She could either sit down and have a talk with her sister and really, in love, just say to her sister, like, can I help you with your finances? What's going on with you? And how can you address this? She could maybe recommend some things for her sister that would make her sister's life better. If she doesn't want to address it like that, if her sister is really just a very lazy, irresponsible person, and that's not going to make a big difference, and she kind of just already knows this, she doesn't even want to waste her time or her energy, or maybe she has one conversation, it doesn't go well, and so she decides to take it another route. And instead of doing that, she says to her sister, listen, I can't loan you the money, but I was going to pay for such and such. And, maybe she was going to have somebody come clean her house that month. And she was going to pay them. She could say, but you can come clean my house and I'll pay you for that. She could handle it like that. Or she could just put a boundary up and say, I can't lend you money anymore. A no is a whole sentence. No is a whole sentence. We don't have to explain. But the point is, she's addressing that emotion within herself, and she is, putting up a boundary to handle that. She's addressing that. She's processing through it. She's not going to have to deal with that frustration and anger as far as this particular issue is concerned. She might find some peace surrounding that and an end to some of that bitterness. Let's talk about Jack. Jack is getting married. He has a fiance that is really, really close to her ex-boyfriend. She has this ex-boyfriend that they were best friends, and then they ended up dating for a while and it didn't work out. But now she's met Jack, and Jack and her have, formed this relationship. And he's asked her to marry him, and she said yes. But he has this fear inside that she's going to go back to her ex-boyfriend. The reason that he does is he keeps seeing these interactions that they have where they just seem really, really close still. And they have these texting strings going on. Every time he addresses this with his future wife, she tells him that he's being ridiculous, that he's just being jealous, that he's blowing this out of proportion, that maybe, it's just some cold feet, and that there's nothing going on and he just needs to, move on from this. And so he just continues to have this fear. He's even addressed it, with a pastor at church, and the pastor has told him, God doesn't give us a spirit of fear. He gives us love, power, and a sound mind. So this fear is not from God. So Jack then just he just starts feeling like a coward. And so, instead of addressing this fear, he goes full force into the wedding. They get married. On the other side of the wedding, this relationship with her ex-boyfriend is still going on. And then, of course, that has to be addressed at some point. And, it may turn into an affair type situation, or it may not. It may just be something that's coming between them in their marriage. Jack could end up feeling just like he's a coward because he's dealt with some fear. This fear was a big situation in his life. And so he could just, guilt and shame himself into believing that he's a coward and that that's just how he is. And he starts to try to prove that he's not to other people. So he's, doing things that aren't really, authentic to him, but he's, trying to prove he's not a coward. There's just a lot of ways this can go if he continues to ignore and not address the fear in his life. Now, this fear that he's had is a very valid fear, right? This fear, the reason he's had these feelings of fear is something needs to be addressed. And so if he would take a look at that before he gets married and address those feelings of fear, he may go to his future wife and say, I understand that you guys were best friends, whatever, blah, 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 but I need you to choose between him or me. Like, it needs to be a choice. And that would be a very valid thing for him to say if he's going to marry this woman, right? And so then they could get that out to begin with. Like, is there still something here with her ex-boyfriend? He probably doesn't need to be marrying her. It could be a situation where they go together and get wise counsel, whatever. But that fear, is a real, it's there to tell him that there is a threat here that he needs to address. And so as he does that, he can not only resolve the fear, but realize that this has nothing to do with whether he's a coward or not. It's just him actually taking a look at what's going on internally. And sometimes those internal things come from external things, external threats, things that we need to be aware of. We don't just walk through parking garages casually whistling at night, in the dark. We are aware of what's going on around us. We have a threat. There is evil in this world. There is broken in this world. And so there's a reason for us to have fear and anxiety come up in our bodies. All right, one more. Liz wants with all of her heart to be a music recording artist. She spent her whole childhood in her room with a microphone pretending that she was singing on stage. This is just her dream, the biggest dream of her life. And so she ends up trying out for a school play. And when she goes to try out for the play, and she sings for the audience very just vulnerably because she loves singing, that's her passion. She gets rejected for the play. Not only does she get rejected for the play, but she has several people take her aside and tell her that she's tone deaf, and that she probably will not end up singing on stage anytime soon. Now, because of this, Liz feels like a ton of just grief and sadness. Like, this has been her dream forever, and she feels like that's been crushed. And she can handle this in a couple ways. First, she could get really very angry at the people who have told her this, and she could decide that she's going to defy them, and she doesn't need to listen to anybody, and she's going to go get her dream anyway. And so she could basically waste a lot of her life, because Liz really is tone deaf. It's not just somebody that stomped on her dream because they were being mean. Like, these people were actually trying to tell her, like, this is not going to happen for you. And sometimes in love, people need to tell us those things so that we don't waste a lot of time and effort doing something that we don't need to be doing. She could also take that advice to heart and just decide that she's been ruined, like her life is ruined, nothing's ever going to come of it. But she's, instead of grieving the dream and healthily getting past that and moving forward, she just stays in this limbo for the rest of her life, where she's never going to dream. She's never going to do anything else that would lead her to disappointment. She could handle it that way, or she could take the advice to heart and grieve and be sad and let herself really sit in that space of grief for as long as it takes for her to get over the fact that she's not going to be a renowned singer. But it's okay. Her grief is very valid. That's something she really wanted to do, something that she loved, that she had a passion for, but it's just really not going to happen for her. She could take the time to sit in that sadness and grief, and then decide, once she gets through that, what is something that I'm good at? What is something that I'm gifted at? What is another passion that I have in my heart? And really start to explore how she was created and what is designed within her, and to, come up with something else to dream about. If she addresses those emotions, that's more of the path that she will be led on. Sometimes we come across emotions that we don't know how to address. Like we're emotional about a situation we're not sure what to do about. Now, sometimes emotions come from other places, right? Sometimes we just have bad days, bad weeks. Sometimes we have hormonal issues, or, as a woman, there's a certain time of month where I'm going to be more emotional than I would, but I can point back and say that's because of this. Chronic emotions, things that we're feeling over and over and over again, are indicators. They're things that lead us to things that need to be addressed, whether that is physical, whether that is mental, whether that is spiritual. It is leading us to things that need to be addressed internally. But when we don't know how to address those things internally, or we don't know what it's pointing us to, what the indicator is, that's when we need to seek out help. We might have some safe and wise friends, people that we have been proven to be trustworthy, that don't talk about our business, that we can go to and talk through things with, and they can give us wise counsel and advice that might lead us into different paths. We might find a counselor or a therapist or a doctor, someone professional to talk to. I think the most important thing to consider in these emotional situations is you want to be talking with someone and hashing these out with someone is trustworthy, someone you feel safe with and feel comfortable with. That may take some searching when it comes to like a therapist or a doctor or a counselor, because you want that person to be someone that that you can trust, that that as you're pouring these things out, you can take their advice and follow their advice and get good results and move forward. But the bottom line is we don't want to hide from, ignore, or push away our emotions. We cannot avoid emotions. And the worst thing that we can do for our emotions and for our bodies as a whole is to view emotions in a negative light, to make them the bad guy, to make them the enemy. Emotions are not your enemy. They're actually a gift, and they were given to you to indicate things internally. We also have natural resources that we can use to process our emotions and to work through them and to release emotional energy from our bodies. And that's what this module is about. We're going to talk about laughing, crying, and even yelling. Let's talk about yelling and the way that these things have been given to us to release some of that pent up emotional energy from our body.